Now, a Swiss billionaire claims he's been approached regarding a potential offer to buy Chelsea and says that Roman Abramovich wants to get rid of the club. It follows calls for Abramovich to face sanctions following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Parliament has heard Abramovich is selling his UK properties, heightening speculation he may do the same with Chelsea Football Club. At the weekend, it was announced that he planned to hand the stewardship of the club to the trustees of its charitable foundation. Swiss billionaire Hansjorg Wyss has been quoted claiming Abramovich is actively trying to sell Chelsea, though we understand that is not the case at this stage. Wyss told Swiss newspaper Blick, said this: Abramovich is trying to sell all his villas in England. He also wants to get rid of Chelsea quickly. I and 3 other people received an offer on Tuesday to buy Chelsea from Abramovich. I have to wait 4 or 5 days now. Abramovich is currently asking far too much, but what I can already say, I'm definitely not doing something like this alone. If I buy Chelsea, then with a consortium consisting of 6 to 7 investors. I'd like to say Simon Kuper from the Financial Times joins us live right now. Simon, thanks so much for coming on. Look, Abramovich still hasn't had his assets frozen, but in your opinion, is it just a matter of time?
As long as this war lasts, the pressure will be very strong on the British government finally to cut the ties with Russian oligarchs, and Abramovich is the best known of them. So I think he is probably now deciding to sell Chelsea when a serious offer comes in, which it will.
Now, Thomas Tuchel refused to talk about this in his press conference yesterday. Should we expect managers to talk about these types of issues?
I think they should, yes. I mean, why did Abramovich buy Chelsea? To launder his reputation, to sports wash his billions. And Thomas Tuchel is being paid out of those billions. And so he must understand that he's not simply a football coach. He has a wider social role. He is Abramovich's face. And so he has to understand that.
You've already said, Simon, that you expect Abramovich will sell Chelsea. Now, we've heard Swiss billionaire Hansjorg Wyss say that Abramovich is looking to sell at the moment, although he said that he's asking for far too much for the club at this moment in time. I guess people will be out there hoping to grab a bargain for a top club like Chelsea, will they, in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, sure, it's going to be marked down. When you sell in a panic, it's always cheaper. But remember, he bought it 19 years ago, I think for about £60 million at the time. That really was a bargain. And I imagine he would get somewhere in the £2 billion range. The club owes him about 1.5 billion. So with inflation, he'll lose a tiny bit of money over 20 years, but he'll have won a couple of Champions Leagues. He'll be remembered as a football man rather than as somebody who stole the mineral wealth of tens of millions of Russians. And so for him, it will have been worth it, even selling at a slight discount.
Simon, what do we know about this Swiss billionaire, Wyss?
I'm not sure. I mean, there are people who know Abramovich. There are people who know Abramovich. He's a very secretive man. He tries never to be public. If you speak to Chelsea senior officials, they'll always talk about the owner or him or Mr. A. They know how important it is for him to be discreet. He will hate it that people around the world are talking about him. So it's very hard to penetrate that inner circle.
And do we know anything about Wyss, this Swiss billionaire who's been talking this week about potentially buying the club? He said he wants to buy the club as part of a consortium if he was to do it with the 6 or 7, not just himself. I mean, presumably someone like Hansjorg Wyss, his billions wouldn't rival someone like Abramovich.
I mean, if you're with a consortium, it means that you yourself don't have the money to buy the club singly, which only a very few oligarchs and sheikhs in the world can do. So then the question becomes, well, who else is in the consortium with you? Are you the face of it because you come from a country, Switzerland, which is accepted? Who is behind that? We know that there is now much more pressure than a few months ago on owners of Premier League clubs with dubious backgrounds or links to dubious regimes. Saudi Arabia buying Newcastle in October, Chelsea now being owned by one of Putin's friends. So I would like to know who is in the consortium. I don't know the answer.
Simon, also wanted to ask you about Alisher Usmanov. Now, the EU has frozen the assets and he could face sanctions in the UK as well. He has got close ties with Everton. Will there be pressure on the club now to distance their relationship with him?
Absolutely. I mean, every club which has relationships with people in broadly from the former Soviet sphere many of whom are close to the Putinist elite. All those clubs are, and every lawyer and public relations representative in London who represents those people is going to be going through that contacts book with great anxiety. So yeah, there'll be a huge attempt to scrub all that out. So if you want to buy a football club at a little bit of a discount now, there will be many opportunities, although of course clubs are much more expensive than they were a decade ago.
Just thinking about FIFA and UEFA, the sort of governing bodies of football, they've suspended Russia's national and club teams until further notice. How do you think they've dealt with this crisis?
Cowardly and weakly. So first, FIFA said that Russia could continue to play, that the team would be called the Russian Football Union, and they wouldn't play the national anthem. The weakest of sanctions, after the worst invasion that we've seen in Europe in 75 years. And it's only after huge pressure that Infantino, who we see on screen, greeting his friend Putin, only after huge pressure did they kick Russia out, when it became clear that none of the other European countries were willing to play them. Remember, Russia was allowed to host the World Cup in 2018 when they had already invaded eastern Ukraine, when they had already killed thousands of people there. And Infantino watched the opening match of the World Cup, Russia-Saudi Arabia, with Putin and the Saudi Crown Prince MBS, who is complicit in the terrible invasion of Yemen. So FIFA is just not exactly a clean operation.
Infantino, though, Simon, has refused to speak about his relationship with Vladimir Putin. What have you made of that?
Sorry, who has refused to speak?
Gianni Infantino.
Yeah, well, if I had a relationship with Putin, I would be refusing to speak about it right now. He didn't refuse to speak about it in the past at all. After the World Cup, he said that the World Cup had helped bring Russia and the West together and help them understand each other. So now he's a bit shy about Putin. But this is a man who put together a deal with Saudi Arabia as well to launch a new competition, the International Nations League, which flopped, and who tried to help Saudi Arabia push into Qatar's World Cup, who gave the last two World Cups to Russia and Qatar. Qatar itself, a very questionable autocratic government. So I can imagine this week he's not keen on answering questions about Putin. But if you have friends like that, then eventually it rebounds on you.